Thanks.
So, under the current Trump administration, we've seen the dismantling of USAID, cuts to Radio Free Asia and Voice of America, and a pause in aid to Tibet-related programs by CTA, even though I'm happy to hear that you recently said that you were able to regain a lot of those funds. So I know you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but my question for you is, how is the CTA adapting to the Trump administration's inconsistent or unpredictable stance on Tibet? Thank you.
When President Trump came for the first term, I was the representative of His Holiness Dalai Lama in Washington, D.C. I spent a little more than 1 year, 3 months in total. And these 1 year, 3 months was very educating for me. We learned, we study every single day. It's not never done, right? News, not law, but news. During the first Trump presidency, you must have heard at that time the White House budget for Tibet was 0. And then we had to approach the Congress, and the Congress was saying the president proposes but the House disposes, which means on financial matters, Congress has more power than the president. Right now, a lot of things are happening. Of course, there are so many things happening every single day. And then he took 3 years to appoint the special coordinator for Tibetan issues, right? That was only in the 4th year he appointed an assistant secretary. Again, we had issues with confirmation of assistant secretary's post in the name of Destro. And then he also signed the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act into law. The Tibet policy of 2002 was amended in 2020. Now it's called Tibet Support and Policy Act of 2020. That also he signed it into law. So generally there is support from the president, but he doesn't speak about Tibet or doesn't speak about His Holiness. Right now, what we are trying to do is we are maintaining good relations with the Foreign Office, which is the State Department, because the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, when he was a senator, he used to champion all the legislations on Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, all those. So he also comes from a Cuba background. I read a book about his autobiography, how he rose from the Florida state politics to Senate, and he also stood for president, even though it's unsuccessful in 2016. So now we work, and the message that we get from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, on New Year's, Tibetan New Year's Day, the message from Marco Rubio was very encouraging. There was also a statement from the State Department, a senior officer, because there were not too many officers appointed in the State Department. Even now, there are so many positions vacant. And I personally wrote to Marco on February 27th, expressing our concern about the cut in foreign assistance. And Marco got back to me on March 10th. He kept the reply till March 10th, even though it was ready by 6/7, to signify the Tibetan National Uprising Day, to give it the political significance to his reply to my letter. And in fact, this must be the first time a United States Secretary of State had written directly to a Sikyong. It doesn't matter whether it's me or anybody else. The fact is, the Secretary of State had written directly to a Sikyong, and that also has its political connotations. So all the messages that we have been receiving is reiteration of US government's policy on Tibet, continued support. So there we don't see too much problem. So even day after tomorrow, we'll have a 4-member delegation coming from State Department with 3 additional members from the US Embassy in Delhi. The Delhi chargé d'affaires, because the ambassador is not there after Eric left back to United States. There's no new appointment as yet, so there's a charge d'affaires, and charge d'affaires will attend the program in Delhi. So they are dividing, but it's a huge delegation. That also signifies political support for Tibet. Now on the funding side, I would like to believe that we became a collateral damage in the whole process when the United States decided to cut funding globally and gave, suspension notices to every partner of USAID. The reason why we managed to get back PRM very fast was because PRM is a separate section in the State Department called Population, Refugees and Migration. There is another section called DRL, Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. So these two are still standing in the State Department. That used to be directly monitored by the State Department, so it was not harmed. So whether it's to do with projects with Tibet Action Institute, but they applied directly to the State Department to counter China's influence out of that $300 million allocated for countering China's influence. And then there's another organization called 0 Point who helps us with internet security. They also got their funding back. So those were programs for Tibet applied individually by individuals or organizations and from the CDA side, right? But the rest, 12 million, falls under USAID. So President Trump has serious issues with USAID, and his administration has serious issues. So they want to bring in a lot of change. And we have been, the people who are on the run in Washington, D.C. are the Namgyal Churula, our representative in the Office of Tibet, then Tenjula and others in the Office of the International Campaign for Tibet. We all work collectively together with no mixed messages. So we all go together. They both, when I'm around here or traveling elsewhere in the world, they go and reach out to members. Then they let me know what the status is, what is a good time for me to come and meet with the members. Because there are calendars for parliaments when they are meeting, whether both houses are meeting or not. So we have to check all those before we go to make sure that we meet the maximum number of people. Right? So this time, from April 28th, I spent 2 weeks in Washington, D.C. Normally I spent only about a week, at the most 10 days, but this time I had to spend 2 weeks to make sure that we meet as many congressmen as possible, or congresswomen as possible, and then also meet with the State Department, Security Council in the White House, and all that. So we managed to meet about 21 members of Congress in the House and Senate, 8 people from the State Department, and 2-3 people from the National Security Council. So based on that, again, we have to plug all holes. We have to keep listening as what's happening. So when I was in US, we were told that the review period, which was initially for 3 months, has been extended by 1 month. So which means up to May 28th or 26th, because there are different dates as to when the order came, you know. So, so there was assurance from the Congress that they will do everything in their hands to get this back, but they had no power in that sense. And with the State Department, I again wrote to Secretary Rubio on March 26th, and there was no reply for that, even in April when I came there. And I asked them the reason why there's no reply for my letter, and I was told that we are waiting to send a positive reply, which means they will have to take a positive decision to give the funding back, right? So then, of course, I went to Canada. When I was in Canada, I saw Marco Rubio's briefing with the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, and Marco mentioned that the retained USAID programs, those programs that have been retained, the responsibility of monitoring evaluation would be given more to the regional offices. That is because they have cut down USAID staff by a lot, from 16,000 to 500, 600. And then in the State Department also, because of Dodge, Musk and Dodge, there were a lot of federal employee cuts. We are still facing problem with VOA, who are federal employees, RFA, they are contract employees by the contractors. So they are 2 different bodies, 2 different statutory or VOA is shungulejere. Radio free is shunguleje mare, contract lane konzulaga chigiyare. So all this, so after hearing that, then I had to go to Japan, from Calgary to Vancouver, BC, meeting with the Tibetan community. Then to Japan, we had this World Parliamentarians Convention. And on the way back, I met with the US Embassy, Charge d'Affaires, and other people who were concerned with the Tibetan cause or the programs. and made sure that if it is referred to the regional office, that's the embassy, by the State Department, we make sure that these people also respond positively in support of our program, right? And that's exactly what I did, and we got a very, I would say, more positive reply, because the 3 months plus 1 month was over by that time. When I came back, it was already mid-June or beginning of second week of June. And they told me that it's still ongoing and we should be a little more patient. And this is exactly the same thing what Nechung said. When we asked Nechung about the finance, Nechung, if you have read Nechung's oracle's statement, he has said, be patient. Ngang ring ches, ngang ring bu ches, be patient. So it's the same input, right? Now, after that, of course, I had to go to England, Berlin, and came back, and not just 1 week since I came back. I got communication about 5 nights ago that the State Department is thinking about restoring, because when we were there, we were asked if we had to cut down a little bit, what would be your priority? So we said for the 2 separate projects we can still manage, but we need this 7 million. 6 million we received through Tibet Fund, 1 million we received directly, Education Department, Home and Health Department. That when we receive directly, then we can save the administration costs, because when we receive through other prime recipient, they charge between 9 to 15 to 20 to 26% for administration. So if the government is giving is 100 rupees, we are getting only about 70, 75, 30, those kind of things, right? So direct funding, we can, administration costs also we get. So that was started only in October 1st last year. So these 1 million for 3 departments and 6 million through the Tibet Fund, which is meant for multiple departments in CD8 in Dharamsala, that they decided to give it back. So 3 days ago, we got it in writing, and yesterday, Meet the Press, there were some 200 media to discuss about His Holiness' statement to the religious conference, but there were also questions about the funding. The last 2 questions were on the funding, and so I had to admit, I thought maybe the US delegation that's coming here for Khotin might like to announce it themselves to the public, but if there's no message from Marco, there won't be time for them to speak. So this is where we are right now. So we have to be very careful in identifying political support, financial support, why all this happened, what was the larger context under which we have come into. So I've always said, but in the meantime, when the budget was cut in January, from January we follow 1st April to 31 March as the financial year, because some countries have different timings. Some starts from 1st July, some starts from 1st October. So when the fund was suddenly cut from January, then we had to pay up to April. Right? That itself cost a little more than $1 million for all the ongoing things that we need to pay for. So fortunately, we got a little less than 2 million from another source to meet this expense. And then for the new year, from April till March next year, of course, we have to again calculate. So we trim down our budget. Sometimes I think we are being too exorbitant. Being a refugee, organizing conferences in 5-star hotels, I never liked it. I never appreciated it. I think we have to live as per our means. Just because the fund is coming from another source does not necessarily mean to say that we have to waste those resources. Right? So these are things what we have been doing. That's why when the US Embassy said, please be patient, I said we are Buddhists, we are patient, but at the same time, we have to keep reminding, we have to plug all the holes wherever it's coming from. And then you have to look at all developments, because now you have these new words being used, recession, R-A-S-C-I-S-S-O-I-N. So this is, for me, it's a new word, maybe not for you. This is now being widely used in the United States. So on those recession lists, Tibet programs were not there, but the broadcasters were there. That is why it's affecting Radio Free Asia and Voice of America. Now, if Voice of America and Radio Free Asia are independent organization, it's easier for us to convince the government to please continue with this program. But it's part of a larger establishment. So you have 1,400 people in the Voice of America, and maybe less in Radio Free Asia. But to get the whole system back, it's a little difficult. But now, of course, litigation is going on. US courts are full with litigations. And let's see how things move. There was, even before President Trump became president, there was a report from the Heritage Foundation, which is a brainchild. When Trump comes to power, Heritage Foundation becomes very important in Washington, D.C., because so many think tanks in Washington, D.C., right? So there also the indication is that whatever skeletal structure they maintain, that could be incorporated directly under the State Department. So these are some suggestions being floated about, because I read the statement by Kerry Lake, who is now the special advisor appointed by DOJ to oversee US AGM, which is the authority that governs all the broadcasters in the United States. That's funded by the US government. Okay, sorry. On show.
Tashile, Tamvunga Tuchie Shogi, Gaming within Tamchai, Los Angeles Nei, and Tiwa the Injikin Tichoshi. So this is a little bit less of, not really as much of a political question, but in the recent Kashak's vision paper, it was listed that it's very important for Tibetans to live in larger compact communities and to be together, and the efforts that you guys are making to put more Tibetans into these communities. However, for people like myself and a lot of other Tibetans in the West, they're much more dispersed in much smaller communities around the globe. And for Tibetans in these situations who don't have many other Tibetans in similar generations to interact with, how would you recommend that they stay committed or become more involved in the Tibetan situation, the Tibetan cause, and in Tibetan culture as well? Tuche.
This vision paper, I hope you read it, or saw it at least, because many people put it on the Chosham. It's not too many papers, very few pages. We wanted to keep it very, how do you call it, very concise, easy to understand. So it starts by talking about the global significance of Tibet. And in the English version is securing Tibet's future. And this is for the first time Kashak of the CTA is coming out with a written vision paper like this. So you can compare these with what I have said during my elections also, whether I have fulfilled any of these, whether I have left anything else or not. These are materials for study. And you will also get a very good understanding of what direction the cabinet is going, in terms of politics, in terms of welfare, in terms of administrative matters. So all the things that we have said in that vision paper are, of course, aimed at resolution of the current issues that Tibetans face, and also look at the longer term, futuristic way of meeting the challenges in future. You can already assess what could be challenges for us. Right? When we came in, we are very bad with numbers. That's why I've always been talking about giving importance to statistics, because if we have statistics, then based on those statistics, we can develop policies and programs. It may not be scientific, but we can say for sure it's going to be more reasonable than what we are doing right now. Because most of our policies and programs are developed on the base of assumption, and it's not enough. So when we came in, the two problems that we found was the dispersal of compact communities, and then the other problem was people without any homes to call their own, particularly those Tibetans who came over from Tibet in the last 30, 40 years. They have nothing to call their own, not even a single inch of land to build a place, build a home on. And then there are Tibetans who live on the Indo-Tibetan border who are facing a lot of problems, the livelihood issues, right? So when we came in, there was no number about how many people don't have homes. I asked the Home Department. They said, we don't have the numbers. And I asked why. The reason is they say if you collect numbers, people will think that they will get something. So I said, that doesn't matter. If we have something to give, we'll give. But if we don't have anything to give, but at least we know how many people are home doesn't have homes to call their own, right? So we started collecting, and now we have numbers. We have 70,000 Tibetans in India, 8,300 Tibetans in Nepal, a little more than 1,000 in Bhutan, but now Bhutanese government is giving citizenship to Tibetan refugees. So once you become a Bhutanese citizen, unlike other countries, you cannot take part in exile political life. So this is one major difference. And then 50, 60,000 all around the world, right? So now we have these numbers. Now we also have the number of how many families don't have homes. How many families are there in India and Nepal? 18,000. Out of 18,000 families, 1,800 don't have homes, which means 10% of the Tibetan population don't have homes. So these two challenges we looked at, and we found that challenge for one is solution for another. So we suggested, why can't we move people who don't have home to the bigger settlements? Because bigger settlements are getting dispersed with a lot of young people who have the capacity to give birth, and also productive labor are going out. So you have most of the older people living in the settlements, less children. That affects our schools. So it has cyclical effects on every other matters, right? So these are some of the challenges. Now, for India, because of this dispersal, we came out with this solution. The immediate need is to cater to the need of people who don't have homes. The longer vision is, if you have vibrant, compact communities, this will give more life to the Tibetan movement in future, right? So this, we have to always think, whenever we think about something, a solution, you have to think long-term and also short-term and long-term, mid-term if possible. Even in terms of budgeting, I have been learning, I know already quite enough, but not enough to understand all the nitty-gritties of the administration, because I was not in administration before, I was in parliament, right? So now I'm teaching people in finance department, how do we need to go about this budgeting and all that. So these are also being worked on. So we are improving on all angles, the capacity of the CTA, individually, institutionally, building numbers, statistics, changing structures, and creating systems of decision making and all those things. So once that is done, then we believe that we can put administration or the bureaucracy on auto mode. They can do their own thing. And any elected new leadership, whoever comes in, can spend more time reaching out to the world and keep the community intact. And also work on Sino-Tibet conflict, because there are so many things we need to do still. Because we right now need to study different scenarios as to what could happen to China in future. And then see under that particular scenario, what are the opportunities for us, what are the challenges for us. So those are the things we need to do. And you're talking about the diaspora community in the West. Now everybody moved on their own. We are not in compact communities, and particularly coming from LA, you have so many small communities. And if you have one meeting in one place, the others have to travel by 2 hours. So you have sometimes less attendance. But LA is a peculiar case. Not all other Tibetan communities are like that. So now what we have tried to encourage is to build compact communities in the West. So over the last 2-3 years, some volunteers in Minnesota, they formed this Tibet Town project, and they've been working over the last 2-3 years. They have been confabulating with us, and we thought that we could give some advance to them to help get through this transaction, and then provide land for housing, so that some 300 plus Tibetans can live together as a community. And then there is already another project. I don't know whether they can start this by September or not, but if they get the fundings, it's a private initiative by Dadala in Minnesota, and they want to start a charter school for Tibetans. But when you say charter school, you can't restrict it only for Tibetans. If others want to get admitted, they can. But we'll also be teaching C learning and maybe Tibetan language and all that. So these are new developments that are happening. because more Tibetans are moving out, and in future also more Tibetans will move out for sure. There's no doubt about it. But I hope less through illegal means. Now you have moved through marriage and all legal means. There will be a lot more out-migration from here, and it's a given thing. So given those things, if we look at the numbers, then you understand the trend. Now, if you understand the trend, then you can calculate the challenges in future. And then make sure that those challenges don't exist in the future if you resolve now. Know how to handle it now, right? Build those capacities. Then we don't need to be, but right now, there are things we can do, there are things we cannot do, but the idea is for the younger generation to get interested in Tibet, understand Tibet, make yourself empowered to speak about Tibet, advocate for Tibet. This is what is more important till we reach a stage where we can build more compact communities. Yeah.